Welcome to r/ProRevenge. How my cousin and I got a photographer locked up for revenge porn. So this all started about 3 years ago. My cousin, who lives in Arizona, always had a desire to have professional nude photos taken. She thought it'd be nice to have something for her husband to look at from when she was in her prime as they aged together. Also, I think it kinda turned her on. However, my cousin had no desire to have those photos publicly published. After a few years of chewing on this idea, she decided she was going to do it. She went out looking for a photographer. She had a tight budget and ended up going with this one man who quoted her $300 for a 1-hour photo shoot. He didn't mind taking nude pictures of her. However, she asked him if he had any agreement or something that would keep those photos confidential. He said he did not. She asked him if she wrote up an agreement basically stating the photos he takes of her cannot be saved on any of his devices, and the SD card needs to be given to her, and that she should be the only person with a copy of the photos, and if he'd agree to that. His only request was that she buy the SD card herself. So she agreed. He sent her what kind of SD card she should buy, and she bought it. She also wrote up an agreement in which the following was agreed upon and signed. Photo shoot was to last 1 hour. He would be paid $300. He would edit 6 pictures of her choosing, airbrushing / making her look better, etc. He would also print those 6 photos. She would supply the SD card. He would also delete any photos of her from any device he has. The photos he takes of her after he's done should not be saved to any device he owns, and the only copy should be on the SD card when he gives her the SD card. He is not allowed to share those photos with anyone for any reason, and those photos belong to her only. Agreement was signed. Photo shoot happened. Photos were edited. She got her SD card. All things well and good. My cousin figured that was that. Obviously, we all know this isn't the end, but just the start, otherwise I wouldn't be posting here. About 6 months after the photo shoot, the photographer contacts her and says he has copies of her photos and knows a website he can sell them to for $500, and if she doesn't want that, she needs to pay him $500. My cousin calls me and asks me what I think she should do, as I'm pretty good at handling dynamic situations. I did some googling and come to find out this could be considered revenge porn, and that's illegal in the state of Arizona. In fact, it's a felony, which means jail time. Also, obviously, this would be considered blackmail, which is also a felony. So I tell my cousin to do this. Don't pay him. If you pay him once, there is nothing stopping him from trying to get you to pay again. Remind him that you are both in the state of Arizona and that it's a felony to distribute revenge porn. Remind him that you had a signed agreement in which he agreed the photos he took of her he would not save a copy and he would never publish anywhere. Remind him if he publishes your photos, you will post him on blast throughout the social media world. She said thanks. I thought this was the end of that story. But about 6 months later, I'm on Reddit, on my porn Reddit account. I have a Reddit account I only use to subscribe to porn subreddits to keep my main account clear of porn. And I'm whacking off, and I'm in one of the subs when I click on a picture. And bam, my dick goes limp. I'm staring at my cousin in a very seductive pose. I knew she was my cousin cause you could see the tattoo of her son's name and birthday. It was a complicated feeling. At first I was annoyed that my whack-off session was ruined by running across a picture of my cousin, and then it dawned on me the photographer didn't listen to her and must have published her photos anyway. So now things get more awkward, cause now I have to call my cousin and tell her how I found her nude photos as I was masturbating. Not a conversation anyone would like to have with a blood relative, but she had to know. So I called my cousin and informed her of what I saw. I sent her the links. I went to the local Facebook groups and left nasty reviews for him. My cousin didn't want her name out there saying nude photos have her existed, so people could go out and find them. I then googled how to DMCA and sent in DMCA notices to the sites I could find that were hosting her photos. I also did a reverse image search and DMCA those as well. I taught my cousin how to do this herself. FYI, The DMCA works, and none of the sites even argued with us. At this point someone PMs me an attorney's number. They tell me this attorney was an advisor to the revenge porn law bill that Arizona passed, and that we should call the attorney. So I did. I explained the story to the attorney. I left out my whacking of bit as I didn't feel that was relevant. The attorney then explained to me, because I wasn't the victim he couldn't really do anything, until the victim contacted him, herself. So I went to my cousin, told her about this attorney, and how she should go speak to the attorney. Now my cousin has a flaw in her personality, she's very quick to forgive. I tried my best to persuade her, but she said she felt the nasty reviews we had left, and spreading the news was enough. Another 6 months pass, and one day my cousin calls me again, and says he wouldn't believe which son of a bitch emailed me. Being the quick thinker I am, I said the photographer right. She said yup, and I said so how much money is he asking for now? She said he's asking for $10,000 to delete her photos, and as compensation for the damages we caused to his business. Apparently people don't want to hire a photographer who publishes people's photographs that they paid him to take without their permission. I told it was time to call the attorney. She agreed. Let's skip ahead a year. Apparently said photographer had plenty of money to fight a legal battle. Long end of the story, my cousin got him convicted for blackmail and revenge porn plus successfully sued him and got a civil judgment for a hefty sum of money. He's currently serving 3 years in an Arizona state prison. Granted, after she got her civil judgment, he had basically sold everything he had, trying to stay out of jail, so it's unlikely she will ever be able to collect, but basically his future earnings now belong to her as I understand it. You stole my car, I will make you homeless. This story happened approximately 4 years ago to a friend of mine. He and his wife, girlfriend back then, took a house loan, bought a new Chevrolet Camaro, and in general they were preparing for a life together. He has proposed to her. Because of their lack of free time, due to their hard working to pay off the loan, they didn't have time for themselves, nor for the abnormal amount of other things such as the housework. So they hired a maid. His first impressions about her were good, and they decided that she's the person they will trust, and they handed her their house keys, because they were at work most of the times she came around to clean their house. First few weeks she worked hard, and always paid attention to detail, and nicely cleaned their house from the bottom to the very top. She was also instructed not to let anyone in, and to always lock the door when she left. After 6 months of her working there, strange things began to happen. Not in any anomalous way, but things started to disappear, being stolen. It all started with small things like AA batteries which are barely noticeable missing. But soon things graduated as phone chargers, perfumes, the more expensive ones, and some electrical gadgets went missing. My friend thought that he simply lost them, but soon the maid raised suspicion as the things went missing when my friend wasn't present when she was detailing their house. But without any evidence blaming her wasn't in place. Also, he found out on some social media that she has got some serious debts, at least in thousands of dollars, aliments, divorce court settlements, etc. So he decided to install security cameras. And he didn't tell the maid. 5 weeks forward, and he had enough evidence to press charges on her, as the things she stole were valued at $250 plus. In my country, anything stolen above $250 is considered a crime. He got furious when his flash disk containing private documents as well as some of his billing and his official work documents was stolen. But he wanted her to get even more into the stealing, so he can squish even the last cent out of her. So he came up with a plan. He told the maid that he and his girlfriend will be gone for a week for a honeymoon, and that he will be going by a taxi not to pay extra money airports charge for the parking. That means his brand new Chevrolet Camaro will stay parked in the house the maid has got keys for. They rented an apartment through Airbnb just few blocks away from his place, and he placed a GPS tracking keychain into his car so he could see where his car is through the phone app. He then placed the car keys in a visible spot on the house so the maid will notice. All what was left is wait for the magic to happen. And his intuition was right. After 2 days of almost constant watching the GPS tracker's location, the car left the garage. All of a sudden the car was cruising at 90 miles per hour on the highway. My friend immediately called the cops. They catched the maid something like 20 miles, 30 kilometers, away. And now the revenge can take place. He decided to press charges on the maid. At the court, the maid told the judges my friend told her to drive the car to some untold location. She acted like she forgot where it is, and the one that should go to the jail is him, because he wrongly accused her, and he just wants to get money from her to pay his loan. But the tables turned. My friend and his lawyer showed the court all of the video evidence of her stealing his stuff valued highly above $250. So it was a crime. She started swearing and telling every single lie she could think of. The security had to calm her down. She is facing 5 years in jail, and she was charged $5,000 including all the stolen property but the car, his lawyer and some other court staff. The price was excluding the car, because it was returned almost immediately. Few days later police did a house check on her, and most of the stolen stuff was there. There were also some other things reported missing from other customers of hers. Due to her previous debts and her new ones she owes, she will very likely become a homeless when she gets out of the jail. Hope you will enjoy it, cunt. Apprentice engineer pisses off the crew, gets left behind 250 miles from home. Some years ago, I got a gig working a weekend music festival. Fairly simple too. 10 bands per day and all pretty standard rock and roll fare. Bossman puts 4 of us out on the gig, me, Dreadful Boris, Big Chris and Hammer. He also said we'd be taking out an apprentice, a young lad who was the son of a local promoter. Well, always nice to have an extra pair of hands, and it's good to help train the next generation after all. That's how we learnt in the past. As it turned out this lad was about as much use as an aqualung to a trout, and had an entitled attitude the size of a mid-ranged African country. On the journey down in the truck, he was boasting as to how he was a really good sound engineer already, and that he could probably show us a few tricks. Oh, really? We get to the venue, and get busy unloading the truck. We've got a 16-ton of stuff to the gills with 2 sound desks, and about 16 kilowatts of sound gear for front of house, and about 6 kilowatts of monitors. As you might imagine, this is pretty heavy stuff, and it takes all of us to safely unload it, and get it stacked up in place except that, after unloading the first amp rack, all on wheels, but still around 80 kilos, the entitled brat snottily announces that I'm a sound engineer, not a humper, and promptly strolls off. Okay. Well, we don't really need him gumming up the works, we are all well used to slinging boxes around, so about an hour later we've got the rig stacked up and strapped down, run out the multi-core to the foredesk, and are ready to start cabling up, and tying power into the on-site generator. Out of nowhere, the spotty oik emerges from whatever hole he had buried himself in, and asks what he can do. I say, I'm going to plug up front of house, perhaps you could help hammer cable up the speakers. He reply, I don't take orders from girlies. Quick side note here, Hammer was 5 feet 9 inches, drop dead gorgeous and as hard as nails, hence her nickname. She was also a damn fine faux engineer and a bloody good mate. Boris, Chris and I collectively groaned inwardly, and winced in anticipation of a full 16-inch broadside from Hammer. Seriously, folks, you do not fuck with her, unless you want the family jewels dangling from the nearest tree. Instead she smiles sweetly, never a good sign, and says, well, I'm sure you'll learn something useful. I then go off to play with cable swap while Boris and Chris busy themselves with the monitors. A while later I'm back on stage. Spotty Oink has wandered off again. Hammer has this resigned look on her face. What happened? I ask. Turns out that, despite cables and connector ports being well labeled, the Oik had managed to make a complete pigzir of plugging up the amp racks. Trust me, it's very hard to make this kind of mistake. I found the Oik some moments later, and told him that it was not the proper way of doing things, and that if he wasn't sure what to do, that he should always ask one of us beforehand. What then came out of his mouth absolutely floored me. I don't need to know all that shit. I'm a sound engineer. Blink. Hammer, who was standing a few feet away, snorted derisively and rolled her eyes heavenwards. It took me a few seconds to process this particular nugget of stupid. Well, you have to know how all this works. It's part and parcel of the job, and as you're here to learn, I suggest you pay attention. He replied, well, you're just a bunch of roadies. What do you know? Upon delivering this charming bon mot, he ambles off, again, leaving me to retrieve my jaw from off the deck and Hammer barely able to restrain a fit of laughter that would have incapacitated a rhino. At a guess, this idiot thought he was going to be white gloving front of house for the whole gig. An hour or so later, we are all set up, and we now have a fair idea of the acts that are going to be performing. In situations like this, you rarely get the opportunity of a full-blown sound check, so you have to rely on experience to set the desk up from cold. Luckily we got the first act on stage a half hour before the kickoff, so I could quickly get a rough sense of the overall setup. A bit of exposition. It's convenient to reuse channels across acts, so I generally keep the first 20 or so channels for drums, bass, and guitars, and the last half dozen or so channels for vocals. If a band comes in with anything else, percussion, brass, Tibetan nose flutes, etc., we whack them on channels in the middle. Keeps things nice, simple and consistent across the board, and becomes important in a moment. The working procedure in show is also simple. Dreadful Boris and Big Chris run the monitor desk, and Hammer and I run front of house. We'll do 2 acts each, before handing over to the other, saves wear and tear on the ears, and when we are not running the desk, we'll handle setting up the stage for each act, and troubleshooting where necessary, as well as doing runs for food and coffee in between. We also tasked the spotty Oig with helping with the stage setups, which rapidly proved problematical. We finished the first act, and aimed to do the turnover within 15 minutes. Generally the incoming act will tell us their mic requirements, and we'll write up a mic plot, which then gets sent up to the front of house desk. Up comes Spotty Oig with the mic plot and he goes back to help with the stage setup. As I'm checking each mic, I notice that I cannot hear the vocal channels. No sooner had I spotted this than Dreadful Boris comes on the intercom and asks me if I can hear the vocal channels. He can't hear them either. He then goes off to check the stage box where all the mics are plugged into. From all the way out front, I hear him shout, "F me." Seconds later he's back on the cans. Do you know what that effing idiot has done? Only repatched all the vocal channels, so that all the plugs on the stage box are lined up neatly one after the other. His words. Ye gods. Boris rapidly repatches the mics, and we are good to go again. A few hours later, and I'm starting my second shift out front. I won't bore you with my experiences of riding herd on Spotty Oig on the stage shift, which shall we say was interesting. Currently on stage is a rather nice jazz septet. I love doing jazz. Give me a nice 20-piece big band, and I'm a happy bunny. Up strolls he who shall not be mentioned and asks, when can I have a go at mixing? I'm really good, you know. Seeing as he's here to learn, I tell him he can take the next act under my supervision. This happened to be an acoustic duo, 2 guitars and 2 vocals. Even the most thorough engineer should be able to handle something so simple, right? Wrong. I've already set what I regarded as a sensible baseline on the faders for him to work with. First thing he does, he reaches for the master faders and cranks in another 15 dB. No. Immediately the rig teeters on the edge of feedback, and I rapidly pull the mains back. Look and listen, balance out the 2 vocals, then the guitars, leave the mains alone. He then starts making wildly inappropriate changes to the channels. Again the rig starts to squeak. Okay, enough. I shove him out of the way and bring it back under control. I won't fatigue you further with the endless catalogue of foul-ups and attitude that he managed to effect over the rest of the weekend. Suffice it to say that despite the best efforts of myself and Hammer to try and teach this guy, they all went to naught. Couple this with the constant drip 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 of snide commentary about how he was really a better engineer than the rest of us, and by the end of the weekend, we are all pretty pissed off. come the end of the event and it's now the fun part of striking the rig and loading out. I'm being sarcastic about the fun part, by the way. 2 solid days and we're all knackered, and the last thing we want to be doing is the get out. But, of course, it has to be done. It's always an all hands on deck situation, except the spotty oik has, once again, vanished into the woodwork. 2 back-breaking hours later, and we're all done, and the truck loaded to go home. So where is the spotty oik? Nowhere. We give it a good 15 minutes but no joy. We then decide to go look for him, so we spent another 20 minutes trolling around the site trying to find him. Again, he's done a disappearing act. We get back to the truck, it's now close to 3 AM, and almost simultaneously we say, F him. We climb back aboard, and drive the 250 miles back to the warehouse to unload. Next afternoon, Bossman calls me to find out why we'd left the spotty oik behind. I gave him the cliff notes, and was then told that the oik had to call his dad at 3 in the morning to come and get him a 500-mile round trip. He then said, I never liked that promoter anyway. He was always late paying the bill on previous gigs. Next time he calls wanting a rig and crew, I think I'll tell him to F off. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for daily revenge stories.